If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. The 99% think money is the root of all evil, while the 1% see money as a tool for freedom. The poor mindset focuses on survival. The rich mindset focuses on growth. If you want wealth, you must first change how you think about money. I remember when I was 25, broke, and working a job that barely paid the bills. One day, my mentor sat me down and said, "You don't have a money problem. You have a thinking problem." That hit me hard. I was blaming everything, my boss, my paycheck, even my background. But I wasn't looking at the real issue, how I thought about money. Poor thinking leads to poor decisions, and poor decisions lead to poor results. Most people think like this: if I could just make a little more money, I'd be fine. But that's not how the wealthy think. The wealthy say, "How can I make my money work for me?" There's a big difference. One mindset is about survival. The other is about growth. If all you ever focus on is working harder for a paycheck, you'll never break free. But if you focus on increasing your value, your skills, and your opportunities, then doors start opening. I once met a young man who told me he was struggling financially. He said, "I just don't make enough." I asked him, "Have you read any books on wealth? Have you learned how money works? Have you developed a skill that people are willing to pay more for?" He looked at me and said, "No, I just don't have the time." There it was, the same thinking that keeps people stuck. The truth is, the 1% make time to learn, to grow, to invest in themselves. The 99% wait for things to change. But things don't change until you change. Look at two people working the same job. One struggles, the other prospers. Why? They both get the same paycheck. The difference is in how they think. One person spends every dollar, the other saves and invests. One says, "I can't afford that." The other says, "How can I afford that?" The difference isn't money, it's mindset. Someone once told me, "But not everyone can be rich." I said, "That's only true if you believe it." The 99% think wealth is out of reach, so they never even try. The 1% believe it's possible, so they take action. And guess what? The people who take action are the ones who succeed. If you want to change your life, start by changing the way you think about money. Stop seeing it as something that controls you and start seeing it as something you can control. Shift your mindset from scarcity to opportunity, from wages to wealth, from excuses to action. Because the moment you do, everything starts to change. You must take personal responsibility. You cannot change the circumstances, the seasons, or the wind, but you can change yourself. I used to have a long list of excuses for why my life wasn't where I wanted it to be. I blamed the government, my employer, the economy. I thought, if only my circumstances were different, I'd be doing better. But then one day, someone looked me in the eye and said, "You can keep making excuses, or you can start making progress, but you can't do both." That was the moment I realized something powerful. My life wasn't going to change until I took full responsibility for it. Most people stay broke because they believe their problems are someone else's fault. They say, "I wasn't born into money," or "the system is rigged against me," or "my boss doesn't pay me enough." But here's the truth. Blaming doesn't change anything. If you spend your time pointing fingers at the government, your upbringing, or your bad luck, you'll never take control of your financial future. Because as long as you believe the problem is out there, you won't do anything to fix it. I remember working a dead-end job, barely making enough to get by. Every Friday, I'd get my paycheck, and by Monday, it was already gone. And I'd think, if only my boss would pay me more. But then I met a man who changed my thinking. He said, "Don't wish it was easier, wish you were better." That hit me hard. I was waiting for the world to change instead of changing myself. I was hoping for a bigger paycheck, but I wasn't becoming more valuable. And that's what most people do. They wait for things to improve instead of improving themselves. I've met people who tell me, "I can't get ahead because the cost of living is too high." And I tell them, the cost of living isn't the problem. The cost of staying the same is. Prices go up, the world changes, and you can either adjust and grow, or you can complain and stay stuck. The 1% take responsibility. They say, "If I need to earn more, I'll learn new skills. If I want a better future, I'll take action today." But the 99% make excuses. They say, "It's not fair. It's not my fault." And while they're complaining, the 1% are out there getting better, getting smarter, and getting ahead. I once knew a man who lost his job and spent years blaming his company for letting him go. Meanwhile, another man lost his job the same day. But instead of blaming, he took responsibility. He said, "I'll never let this happen again." He learned new skills, started his own business, and within 5 years, he was making 10 times what his old job paid him. The difference wasn't in what happened to them, it was in how they responded. If you want to change your financial future, stop waiting for someone else to do it for you. Take responsibility. Own your choices. Because the day you decide that your success is in your hands, that's the day everything starts to change. Wages make you a living, but profits make you a fortune. That was one of the most important lessons I ever learned. Most people spend their whole lives working for wages, thinking that if they just work a little harder or get a small raise, they'll finally get ahead. But the truth is, wages will always have a limit. You can only work so many hours, and your boss will only pay so much. Profits, on the other hand, have no limit. I remember when I was working a regular job, putting in long hours, trying to make ends meet. Every time I got a paycheck, it was already spoken for. Rent, food, bills. And I thought, this is just the way life is. But then I met a man who opened my eyes. He said, "If you work for wages, you can survive. But if you learn how to make a profit, you can thrive." That conversation changed my life. Most people are taught to focus on getting a paycheck, but very few are taught how to generate profits. That's why 99% of people struggle financially. They depend on someone else to decide their income. But the 1% think differently. They ask, how can I create something valuable? How can I sell something? How can I invest in something that grows? Instead of relying on a paycheck, they build income streams that work for them. I once knew a man who worked as a mechanic. He was good at his job, worked long hours, and made a decent wage. But one day, he realized that no matter how hard he worked, he was still limited by the hours in a day. So he decided to start fixing cars on the side, charging people directly for his work. Before long, he was making more in his part-time business than in his full-time job. Eventually, he quit his job and built a thriving auto repair business. What changed? He stopped thinking like an employee and started thinking like an owner. That's the difference between wages and profits. Wages keep you dependent. Profits set you free. The moment you start thinking beyond just a paycheck is the moment you open the door to wealth. Some people say, "But I don't know how to start a business." That's okay. You don't have to build a big company overnight. Maybe you start by selling something in your free time. Maybe you invest in assets that grow in value. Maybe you create something once that pays you over and over again. The key is to stop trading all your time for money and start thinking about how to make money work for you. Poor people spend their money and save what's left. The rich save their money and spend what's left. That simple shift in thinking makes all the difference between struggling financially and building wealth. But most people never learn this lesson. They work hard, earn their paycheck, and then spend it as fast as it comes in. And when the money runs out, they wonder why they can never seem to get ahead. I used to be just like that. Every time I got paid, I had a list of things I wanted to buy. A nicer car, new clothes, going out to eat. And every month I told myself, next month I'll start saving. But next month would come, and I'd do the same thing. Then one day, I met a man who asked me a question that changed my thinking. He said, "What do you have to show for the last 10 years of work?" I thought about it, and the answer was nothing. I had spent everything I made. I had worked hard, but I had built nothing. That's the trap of instant gratification. Most people live for today. If they get a raise, they increase their spending. If they get a bonus, they buy something new. They never stop to think about tomorrow. But the 1% think differently. They take a portion of everything they earn and put it to work. They invest in their future before they spend on luxuries. I once knew a man who made good money, more than most people. But he spent every dime. He had the nicest clothes, the newest gadgets, the best vacations. But then one day, he lost his job. And because he had saved nothing, he lost everything. On the other hand, I knew another man who made a modest income, but lived below his means. He saved and invested consistently, and over time, his money grew. Years later, he had more wealth than people who had made twice as much as him. The difference wasn't in how much they made. It was in how they handled what they made. Most people think wealth is about how much you earn. But wealth isn't what you earn. It's what you keep and what you grow. If you want to change your financial future, you have to change what you do with your money. Before you spend $1, ask yourself, is this making me richer or poorer? If you spend everything on things that lose value, you'll always be broke. But if you put your money into things that grow, investments, skills, assets, then over time, your money starts working for you instead of just disappearing. The difference between the 99% and the 1% isn't luck, and it isn't income. It's choices. One group spends first and wonders why they're always struggling. The other group invests first and enjoys financial freedom. If you want to change your life, start by changing this one habit. Because the moment you start making money work for you, instead of just spending it, your entire future begins to change. If you are not willing to risk the unusual, you will have to settle for the ordinary. That's the reality most people don't want to face. They want success, they want wealth, but they also want comfort. They want guarantees. They want to be absolutely sure that whatever they do will work before they even try. And because of that fear, they never take the steps that could change their lives. I remember when I was young, I was afraid to take risks. I wanted a better life, but I was stuck in the same routine, doing the same things over and over. And I thought, maybe someday something will change. But then I realized, nothing changes unless you change. The people who win in life, the people who build wealth, are the ones who step out of their comfort zones. They take calculated risks. They try, they fail, they adjust, and they try again. Most people are so afraid of failure that they never even start. They say, what if I lose money? What if it doesn't work? What if I look foolish? But here's the bigger question. What if you do nothing? What if 5 years from now, you're still in the same place, still struggling, still making excuses? That's the real risk. Wasting your life because you were too afraid to try. I once knew a man who wanted to start a business. He had a great idea, but he was scared. He said, "What if it fails?" So he waited and waited. Years passed, and one day he saw someone else succeed with the exact same idea. That person took action while he hesitated. The lesson? Opportunities don't wait. Fear keeps people stuck, but action moves people forward. Now, I'm not saying take reckless risks. I'm not saying throw all your money into something you don't understand. But I am saying you have to take some risks if you ever want to get ahead. Maybe you invest in a new skill. Maybe you start a small side business. Maybe you save up and take a chance on something that could change your future. Because if you never take a step, you'll never get anywhere. The 99% let fear control them. They wait for the perfect moment, which never comes. The 1% understand that risk is part of the game. They educate themselves, they prepare, and then they take action. And here's the secret. They don't always succeed the first time, but they learn. They adjust. They keep going until they win. Fear will always be there, but you have to decide. Will it control you, or will you push past it? Because if you refuse to risk, you are choosing to stay ordinary. And the moment you choose courage over fear, your whole world starts to change. Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. That's the truth most people never realize. They think if they just go to school, get a degree, and find a job, they'll be set for life. But that's not how wealth is built. A diploma might help you get started, but it's what you learn after school that determines your financial future. I remember when I was young, I thought I knew everything I needed to know. I had finished my schooling, got a job, and believed that was enough. But then I met a man who was wealthy, and he asked me a simple question. What skills do you have that can make you rich? I had no answer. I had learned how to work for money, but I had never learned how to make money work for me. That's when I realized, if I wanted a different life, I needed to learn the skills that create wealth. Most people never do that. They stop learning the moment they finish school. They work hard, but they never develop the knowledge that leads to financial success. They don't study money. They don't learn how to invest. They don't understand how businesses grow. And because of that, they stay stuck, always working harder instead of working smarter. I once knew a man who spent every evening watching television. He would say, "I just don't have time to learn new things." But another man I knew spent that same time reading books on business, money, and personal development. One of them struggled financially his whole life. The other became wealthy. The difference wasn't luck. It was learning. If you want to change your financial future, you need to learn skills that create wealth. Learn how to sell, because sales is one of the highest paying skills in the world. Learn how to manage money, because if you don't control your finances, they will control you. Learn how to invest, because if your money isn't growing, you're falling behind. The 99% focus on working harder. The 1% focus on learning more. Because when you develop valuable skills, you increase your earning potential. When you understand money, you stop wasting it. When you know how to build wealth, you stop living paycheck to paycheck. Success isn't about luck, and it's not about intelligence. It's about knowledge. And the good news is, anyone can learn. It doesn't matter where you start. What matters is that you commit to growing, to learning, to developing the skills that can change your life. Because the moment you start educating yourself beyond what school taught you, your financial future begins to change. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Think about that for a moment. Look around at the people in your life, their habits, their mindset, their financial situation. Because whether you realize it or not, their influence is shaping you every single day. Most people never take this seriously. They spend time with whoever happens to be around. Coworkers who complain about their jobs, friends who make excuses instead of progress, family members who say, "That's just the way life is." And before they know it, they've adopted the same beliefs, the same attitudes, and the same results. I remember when I was struggling financially, and I took a hard look at the people around me. They were all just like me, broke, frustrated, making excuses. And I realized if I didn't change my environment, I was never going to change my future. So I made a decision. I was going to find people who were ahead of me, people who had success, people who had a different mindset. And once I started surrounding myself with winners, my whole world began to change. Here's what most people don't understand. Success and failure are both contagious. If you're around people who blame the government, the economy, their boss, you'll start thinking the same way. But if you're around people who take responsibility, who look for opportunities, who push themselves to grow, you'll start thinking like them. I once met a young man who wanted to be successful, but he was surrounded by friends who spent all their time drinking, partying, and wasting money. He told me, "I don't want to end up like them." I said, "Then why are you spending all your time with them?" It was a tough conversation, but he made the hard choice to distance himself and start spending time with mentors, business owners, and people who were going somewhere. A few years later, he had built his own successful company. If you want to change your life, start by changing your circle. Find people who inspire you. Find people who push you to be better. If you don't know anyone like that, start reading books by successful people. Listen to their ideas. Learn from their experiences. Because the truth is, your environment is shaping you whether you realize it or not. The 99% stay stuck because they keep the wrong company. The 1% make intentional choices about who they allow to influence them. And that one decision makes all the difference. Excuses are the language of poverty, and wealth has no room for them. You can have excuses, or you can have results, but you can't have both. Too many people spend their lives explaining why they can't succeed instead of figuring out how they can. And let me tell you, that kind of thinking keeps you broke. So the question is, how many barriers have you built? And are you ready to tear them down? Because until you do, wealth will remain out of reach. Every excuse you make is a chain that keeps you tied to where you are. The rich don't accept chains, they break them. You can either complain about your circumstances or change them. But you can't do both. Excuses will keep you broke. Responsibility will make you rich. That's the simple truth. But too many people don't want to hear it. They want to point the finger at the economy, their boss, their upbringing, their bad luck. But let me tell you something. The moment you start making excuses, you give up control over your own life. And if you don't control your life, someone else will. I've met people who have every reason to fail, and yet they succeed. And I've met people who have every opportunity to win, yet they find a way to lose. Why? It's not about circumstances. It's about mindset. It's about responsibility. The rich don't sit around explaining why they can't. They figure out how they can. They don't ask, "Why is life unfair?" They ask, "What can I do about it?" I remember a time early in my life when I had nothing. No money, no skills, no direction. I could have made excuses. I could have said, "Well, I wasn't born into a rich family," or "The government should help people like me." But instead, I asked myself one simple question. What do I need to change about me to live the life I want? That question changed everything. Because once I took full responsibility, I stopped waiting for things to get better and started making them better. Now let's talk about your mindset. Because your mindset is either a prison or a key to wealth. If you believe you can't succeed, you've already lost. The rich don't entertain limiting beliefs. They don't say, I'm not smart enough, or I don't have the right connections. They don't allow negative thinking to control their future. Instead, they train their mind to focus on solutions. They ask, how can I learn what I don't know? Or, who do I need to meet? If you think wealth is out of reach, you'll never stretch to grab it. If you believe success is for other people, you'll never become one of them. Your mind can either build walls or open doors. And the only person who decides that is you. I've met people who were dead broke at 30 and millionaires by 40. And I've met people who were struggling at 40 and still struggling at 60. The difference? The first group changed how they thought. The second group never did. So if you want to change your life, start by changing the way you think. Stop making excuses. Take full responsibility. And once you do, you'll realize that wealth was never outside of your reach. It was just waiting for you to reach for it. Now let's go even deeper into this. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect opportunity, the perfect conditions. But let me tell you, there's no such thing. If you keep waiting for life to hand you success, you'll be waiting forever. The rich don't wait. They act. They see an opportunity and take it, even if they're not fully prepared. They understand that progress is better than perfection. You have to challenge the way you think. The next time you catch yourself making an excuse, stop. Ask yourself, is this really true? Or is it just something I've been telling myself for years? Because once you challenge a limiting belief, it loses its power over you. I've seen it happen time and time again. People who thought they couldn't, suddenly could. People who thought they weren't smart enough, became experts. People who believed they weren't the type to be rich, built wealth beyond their imagination. It all started with taking responsibility and shifting their mindset. Complaining never changed a situation. Complaining never built wealth. Complaining never turned a life around. But solutions do. The difference between those who struggle and those who succeed is simple. One group focuses on problems, the other focuses on solving them. I've seen it time and time again. People sit around talking about how unfair life is, how tough the economy is, how hard it is to get ahead. They spend all their energy describing the problem, but almost no energy solving it. The rich don't waste time complaining. They recognize a problem, and instead of saying, "This is terrible," they ask, "What can I do about it?" That's the shift. The moment you replace complaints with solutions, everything changes. I remember when I was young and broke. I could have complained about my situation. I could have blamed the government, the job market, my lack of education. But where would that have gotten me? Nowhere. Instead, I started asking different questions. How can I make more money? Who can I learn from? What skills do I need? See, when you ask the right questions, your mind starts looking for answers, and answers lead to action. Let me tell you something important. The market doesn't care about complaints. The economy doesn't reward whining. The world doesn't stop and fix things for you just because you're unhappy. But if you take action, if you focus on solutions, doors start opening. I met a man once who spent years complaining about his job. He hated it, but he stayed because he thought he had no other choice. One day I asked him, instead of complaining about the job you don't want, why not figure out how to create the job you do want? That question changed everything for him. He stopped focusing on what was wrong and started looking for solutions. A few years later, he was running his own business. The same man who once felt trapped had created his own freedom. See, every minute you spend complaining is a minute you could have spent solving the problem. Every ounce of energy wasted on frustration is energy that could have been used for growth. And let's talk about another thing that holds people back: their past. Because too many people think their past defines them. But let me tell you, it doesn't. Your past is a chapter, not the whole book. The person you were 5 years ago doesn't have to be the person you are today. The choices you made yesterday don't have to be the choices you make tomorrow. The rich understand this. They don't let their past failures, mistakes, or disadvantages dictate their future. They take control of their story. I've seen people come from nothing, no money, no education, no connections, and build incredible wealth. And I've seen people who had every advantage in life, yet they threw it away. What does that tell you? It tells you that your future is not determined by where you started. It's determined by the decisions you make now. I'll tell you what holds most people back. It's not their background, not their education, not their circumstances. It's beliefs. If you believe you're stuck, you'll stay stuck. If you believe you can't succeed, you won't. But the moment you believe that you have the power to change your future, you start acting differently. I know people who made terrible financial decisions when they were younger. Maybe they got into debt. Maybe they wasted years on the wrong path. And they tell themselves, it's too late for me. But let me tell you something. It's never too late. The only time it's too late is when you decide to give up. Your past doesn't have to hold you back. In fact, it can be the very thing that pushes you forward. The struggles you've been through can teach you valuable lessons. The mistakes you've made can help you make better choices. But that only happens if you stop dwelling on the past and start building the future. If there's one thing that separates the wealthy from those who struggle, it's what they choose to invest in. The poor invest in entertainment, distractions, and excuses. The rich invest in knowledge, skills, and personal growth. Because here's the truth. Your bank account is a direct reflection of what you've learned and applied over time. I've met people who tell me, I can't afford to buy books. I can't afford to take courses. I don't have time to learn. But these same people will spend hours watching television, scrolling through their phones, or spending money on things that bring no return. See, it's not that they can't afford to invest in knowledge. It's that they've convinced themselves it's not necessary. But let me tell you, knowledge is the foundation of wealth. Without the right knowledge, you won't recognize opportunities. Without the right knowledge, you won't develop the skills that create income. Without the right knowledge, you'll keep making the same financial mistakes over and over. The rich understand this. That's why they never stop learning. I remember when I was young and broke. I had no money, no direction. But someone gave me a book. That book changed my life. It opened my mind to ideas I had never considered. And from that moment on, I made a decision. I would invest in my education. Not school education, but self-education. I started reading books on finance, business, and success. I listened to people who were wealthy and learned how they thought. And little by little, my mindset changed. And when my mindset changed, my results changed. I once met a man who was struggling financially. He told me he wanted to be successful, but didn't know how. I asked him, "How many books have you read on wealth building?" He said, "None." "How many seminars have you attended?" "None." How many successful people have you studied? None. And there was the problem. He wanted success, but he wasn't willing to invest in learning how to get it. See, most people want to be rich, but they don't want to change. They want a better life, but they don't want to grow. And that's why they stay stuck. Because wealth isn't about luck. It's about knowledge applied with action. And that brings me to the next point, action. Because knowledge alone isn't enough. You have to do something with what you learn. Too many people read books, take notes, and make plans, but they never act. They wait for the perfect moment. They hesitate. They overthink. But success doesn't wait for those who hesitate. I've met people who tell me, I'll start when I have more money. I'll start when the timing is right. I'll start when I feel ready. And guess what? They never start. Because there's never a perfect time. The perfect time is when you decide to start. I once knew a man who wanted to start a business. He had great ideas, but he kept waiting. He waited for the economy to improve. He waited to have more savings. He waited to feel more confident. And years went by, but nothing changed. Then one day, he realized something. If he kept waiting, life would pass him by. So he took action. And once he did, things started moving. His business grew, his income increased, and his life changed. That's the difference. The wealthy don't wait. They take action now. They don't have all the answers, but they start anyway. They don't know every step, but they take the first one. And as they move forward, things become clearer. I once heard someone say, the best way to learn is by doing. And it's true. You don't become successful by sitting on the sidelines. You don't become wealthy by waiting for the right conditions. You have to start. You have to take risks. You have to be willing to fail and learn along the way. And here's the thing. Action builds confidence. The more you do, the more you believe in yourself. The more you believe in yourself, the more action you take. It's a cycle. And that cycle leads to success. So here's what I want you to take from this. Stop making excuses. Invest in knowledge. Read the books. Learn the skills. Seek the mentors. And then take action. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Start now. Because the sooner you start, the sooner you'll see results. And once you do, you'll never look back. If you want to know where someone is headed financially, just look at their daily habits. Because success is not a mystery, and neither is failure. They both leave clues. And the biggest clue of all? The things you do every single day. Your financial results are not determined by luck or by circumstances. They are determined by the small choices you make over and over again. I once met a man who told me he couldn't get ahead financially. He said, "No matter what I do, I always end up broke." So I asked him, "Tell me about your daily routine." He woke up late, rushed out the door, spent money on things he didn't need, came home, watched hours of television, and repeated the same cycle the next day. And there was the problem. His financial situation was simply the result of his daily habits. See, the wealthy don't have a magic formula. They just have better habits. They read instead of wasting time. They plan their finances instead of hoping for the best. They invest in their growth instead of spending money on temporary pleasures. They work on their skills instead of making excuses. And because they do these things every day, their results improve every year. I remember when I first started learning about success, I realized something important. What I did every day mattered more than what I did once in a while. It wasn't the big dramatic changes that made the difference. It was the small, consistent actions. So I changed my habits. I started reading for an hour a day. I started setting financial goals and tracking my progress. I started associating with people who challenged me to grow. And over time, those little changes made a big difference. But most people never make those changes. They keep waiting for something to magically fix their situation. They keep wishing for wealth, but they never develop the habits that create it. And that's the biggest mistake of all. Thinking that success comes from wishing instead of doing. I once had a young man come up to me and say, "I want to be rich." I said, "Great. What are you doing to make that happen?" He said, "Well, I think about it all the time." And there was the problem. Thinking about success is not enough. Wishing for wealth won't bring it. Only action does. See, wealth comes to those who do, not those who wish. The world is full of people who dream about success, but never take the steps to achieve it. They talk about their goals, but never work on them. They hope for a better future, but never change their present. And because of that, their dreams stay dreams. But the wealthy are different. They don't just think about success. They act on it. They take risks. They make decisions. They step out of their comfort zone. And because they do, they create results. I knew a man who wanted to start a business. He had big ideas, big plans, big dreams. But year after year, he stayed stuck in the same job, making the same excuses. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I don't know if it will work. Meanwhile, someone else with fewer resources, less experience, and more challenges went ahead and started their business. And within a few years, that person was financially free. The difference? One person wished, the other person did. See, you don't have to know everything before you start. You don't have to have the perfect plan. You just have to begin. The wealthy don't wait for the perfect moment. They start where they are with what they have. And as they move forward, they learn, they adapt, and they grow. There are two types of people in life: those who take action and those who make excuses. And you have to decide which one you will be. Because every day that you hesitate, every day that you delay, every day that you stay stuck in old habits is a day that keeps you from the success you could have had. So ask yourself, what are you doing today to move toward wealth? What actions are you taking? What habits are you building? Because at the end of the day, your financial future is not determined by what you wish for. It is determined by what you do. Everyone wants a better life. Everyone wants more money, more freedom, more choices. But the truth is, most people aren't willing to do what it takes to get there. They want the rewards without the work, the wealth without the sacrifice. And that's why so many stay stuck. Because success is never free. It comes with a price. And that price is discipline, effort, and temporary sacrifice. I once met a young man who wanted to be financially independent. He told me, "I just don't have enough money to invest." So I asked him, "What do you spend your money on?" He admitted that every weekend he was out with friends, buying things he didn't need, spending money on entertainment, eating at restaurants, and upgrading to the latest gadgets. And right there was the problem. He had the money. He was just spending it in the wrong places. See, wealth isn't built by doing what's easy or convenient. It's built by making choices that most people aren't willing to make. It's skipping the unnecessary spending today so you can invest in your future. It's putting in extra effort now so you can enjoy financial freedom later. The rich understand this. They are willing to make sacrifices today so they can prosper tomorrow. I remember when I started out, I didn't have much. But I made a decision. I would put every extra dollar toward my future. I skipped the things I wanted in the moment so I could have the things I truly needed later. I didn't buy what I couldn't afford. I didn't waste time on distractions. I stayed focused. And over time, those small sacrifices turned into something great. But most people never do this. They tell themselves, I'll start saving when I make more money. I'll start investing when I have extra. But they never do, because every time they earn more, they spend more. Every time they have an opportunity to sacrifice, they choose comfort instead. And then they wonder why they never get ahead. The truth is, you can't have it both ways. You either make sacrifices now, or you struggle later. You either delay gratification, or you pay the price in the future. Because life will always demand a price. The question is, will you choose to pay it now while you have control, or will you be forced to pay it later when you have no choice? And that brings us to the next truth. You either have excuses or results, but not both. I once spoke with a man who told me, I could be rich if only things were different. He blamed the economy. He blamed his upbringing. He blamed his job. He had an excuse for everything. And yet, I knew people who started with less than him and still became successful. The difference? They didn't waste time on excuses. They focused on getting results. Excuses are a way to stay comfortable. They make you feel better about not taking action. But they also keep you broke. The moment you start justifying why you can't do something, you give up control of your future. The moment you say, it's not my fault, you hand over responsibility for your life. The rich think differently. Instead of saying, I can't, they ask, how can I? Instead of complaining about the economy, they look for opportunities. Instead of blaming their past, they focus on what they can do now. They don't allow excuses to stop them. They find solutions. I remember when I wanted to improve my finances, I had two choices. I could say I don't have the right connections. I don't have the resources. I don't have the experience. And if I had believed those excuses, I would have stayed exactly where I was. But instead I asked, what can I do with what I do have? And that's what made the difference. The world is full of people who are waiting for the perfect time, waiting for the right conditions, waiting for life to hand them an opportunity. And because they wait, they never take action. They let years pass by while they keep making the same excuses. And then one day, they wake up and realize nothing has changed. But the people who succeed don't wait. They start where they are. They use what they have. They find a way. They don't sit around wishing. They do. And that's why they get results. So ask yourself, are you choosing excuses or results? Are you making sacrifices today that will lead to success tomorrow? Or are you staying in the same place, hoping for something to change without taking action? Because at the end of the day, wealth doesn't come to those who make excuses. It comes to those who decide that no matter what it takes, they will find a way. If you want to have more, you have to become more. That's the simple truth. You don't get paid for time, you get paid for the value you bring to the marketplace. And how do you increase your value? You educate yourself every single day. Life doesn't get better by chance. It gets better by change. But change doesn't happen in an instant. It happens in the small daily habits of learning, growing, and improving every day. Success is not something you pursue, it is something you attract by becoming the person who deserves it. And the only way to become that person is through consistent learning. Every day is an opportunity to grow, But the question is, are you taking it? Most people go through life on autopilot, repeating the same routines, facing the same struggles, and wondering why nothing changes. But the truth is, change begins with what you know. If you want a better life, you have to know more. If you want to earn more, you have to learn more. The secret to success is simple. Discipline yourself to learn something new every single day. Someone once asked, what's the difference between the successful and the unsuccessful? The answer is simple. What they do daily. The wealthy, the achievers, the ones who keep growing, they make it a habit to learn. Not once in a while, not when they feel like it, but every single day. And it's not always about formal education. In fact, some of the most successful people in the world never had a college degree, but they never stopped learning. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you read a book that challenged your thinking? When was the last time you studied a skill that could increase your value in the marketplace? If the answer is, I don't remember, then that's a problem, because the world is changing fast. What worked 10 years ago may not work today. What made money yesterday may not make money tomorrow. But if you're always learning, always adapting, always growing, you stay ahead of the game. A man once told me, I don't have time to learn. I said, then you don't have time to grow. Because that's what learning is. It's growth. And if you don't grow, you stay where you are. And if you stay where you are, you'll never get what you want. But here's the good news. You don't need hours a day to learn. You just need consistency. If you read 10 pages of a good book every day, that's over 3,600 pages a year. That's about 10 to 12 books that could change your life. Imagine how different your mindset, your habits, and your financial situation could be if you fed your mind with wisdom every day instead of mindless entertainment. Because that's what the wealthy do. They value learning more than distractions. They know that knowledge compounds like interest, and the more they invest in themselves, the more life rewards them. So the question is, will you make learning a priority? Will you commit to growing every day? Because success isn't about luck, it's about preparation. And those who prepare win. A diploma might help you pay the bills, but the right knowledge can build you a fortune. Too many people stop learning the moment they leave school. They believe education ends with a certificate, but that's where real education should begin. Because formal education is designed to help you make a living, but self-education, that's what gives you the power to create wealth, to build something bigger than just a paycheck. Take a look around. There are people with advanced degrees struggling financially, and there are people with no formal education running successful businesses. What's the difference? One stopped learning when school ended, and the other never stopped learning. The marketplace doesn't pay you for what you know. It pays you for the value you bring. And value doesn't come from a degree. It comes from knowledge, from skills, from the ability to think, solve problems, and create solutions. Some of the wealthiest people in history never had a college degree, but they were lifelong students. They studied the marketplace, they studied people, they studied success. They read books, they listened to mentors, they took risks, they experimented, they failed, and they learned. That's real education, the kind that changes your life. Because real education isn't just about knowing facts. It's about knowing how to use knowledge to create opportunities. There was a man who once told me, I finished school years ago. I said, you finished. Learning is not something you finish. The moment you stop learning, you stop growing. And if you stop growing, you start falling behind. The world keeps moving forward. New ideas, new industries, new opportunities. Everything is changing. And the ones who stay ahead are the ones who keep learning. Now, not saying don't go to school. Get your education, but don't stop there. Develop the habit of self-education. Read books on finance, on personal growth, on sales, on leadership. Learn skills that increase your value. If you work for a company, study what makes that business successful. If you run your own business, study the people who built great businesses before you. If you're in sales, study the best salespeople. There's a book, a course, a mentor for everything you want to learn. The question is, are you willing to learn? Because here's the truth. No one is coming to give you success. The government won't do it. Your employer won't do it. Your family won't do it. If you want more, you have to become more. If you want to earn more, you have to learn more. That's the secret. And the best part, you have complete control over how much you learn. So take responsibility for your education and life will take care of the rest. Your income is a direct reflection of your knowledge and skills. If you want to earn more, you must learn more. It's that simple. The marketplace rewards value, and the only way to increase your value is through learning. Some people say, I want to make more money, but they don't want to change. They don't want to grow. They want to raise without becoming more valuable. But money doesn't respond to wishes, it responds to worth. The more you develop yourself, the more opportunities open up. The more skills you acquire, the more people are willing to pay for your time, your expertise, and your solutions. I once met a man who had been in the same job for years, earning the same salary. He complained, "They don't pay me enough." I asked him, "How much have you learned in the last 5 years?" He hesitated. "Well, I've just been doing my job." There was his answer. If you do the same thing in the same way, year after year, why would anyone pay you more? If you want to increase your income, you must increase your knowledge. Look at the people who make the most money. They are experts in their field. They know things others don't. They have skills others lack, and because they took the time to learn, they get paid more. A doctor, a lawyer, an investor, these people spent years developing their knowledge, and the marketplace rewards them accordingly. The same principle applies everywhere. You don't have to be a doctor or lawyer to earn well, but you must become an expert in something. The good news is we live in a time where learning has never been easier. Books, courses, mentors, online resources, knowledge is everywhere. But here's the catch. Only those who seek it will benefit. The difference between where you are now and where you want to be is what you learn along the way. So ask yourself, what skills could make you more valuable? What knowledge could open new doors? Find those answers and start learning today, because the more you learn, the more you earn. If you want to be successful, don't reinvent the wheel. Learn from those who have already done it. Success leaves clues. The people who have built wealth, created businesses, and achieved financial freedom have left behind a trail of lessons, strategies, and wisdom. Your job is to study them, apply what works, and avoid the mistakes they made. Too many people try to figure it all out on their own. They waste years making avoidable errors when they could have learned from someone who has already walked the path. Why struggle blindly when the answers are already out there? If you want to get in shape, you don't guess your way through a workout. You follow the advice of a trainer. If you want to invest wisely, you don't randomly pick stocks. You learn from those who have built wealth through investing. I remember a young man who came to me and said, "I want to be rich." I asked him, "Who are you studying?" He looked confused. "What do you mean?" I said, "Who's teaching you how to be rich? What books are you reading? What successful people are you learning from?" He had no answer. He wanted wealth, but he wasn't learning from anyone who had it. That's like wanting to climb a mountain, but refusing to use a map. Find people who have achieved what you want and study them. Read their books, listen to their talks, understand how they think and what they do. Pay attention to their habits, their mindset, their decision-making. Success isn't a mystery, it's a formula, and if you follow it, you will get results. If someone has built $1 million business, they've left behind lessons on how they did it. If someone has mastered sales, they've shared their techniques. If someone has created financial independence, they've written about the steps they took. The clues are all around you, but you have to be willing to look for them. So don't waste time guessing. Learn from those who have done it. Study success, apply what you learn, and one day others will be looking to you for the clues. Most people spend their lives working hard at their job, hoping that one day all that effort will lead to success. But here's the truth. Working hard on a job will help you make a living, but working hard on yourself will help you make a fortune. A job can give you a paycheck, but personal growth can give you wealth. A job can provide security, but personal development can give you freedom. The difference is in what you choose to invest in. Too many people put all their energy into their job, but they neglect their own growth. They wake up, go to work, put in the hours, come home, and repeat the cycle. And years later, they wonder why nothing has changed. I once met a man who had been working the same job for 20 years. He told me, "I don't understand why I'm still struggling financially." I asked him, "In the last 20 years, how much have you invested in improving yourself?" He was silent. He had been working hard at his job, but he hadn't been working on himself. No new skills, no new knowledge, no new thinking. He was earning the same because he was the same. If you want more, you have to become more. If you want to earn more, you have to learn more. If you want to achieve financial success, you have to grow into the kind of person who attracts success. Money doesn't come to those who simply work hard. It comes to those who provide more value. And you can't provide more value unless you develop yourself. Read books, listen to successful people, take courses, develop new skills. Work harder on improving your mind, your attitude, and your knowledge than you do at your job. Because when you grow, everything else in your life grows with you. Your income, your opportunities, your success. So don't just work for a living. Work on becoming the kind of person who creates a fortune. That's how you change your financial future. If you want to change your life, start by changing what you know. The books you don't read won't help you. The knowledge you never seek out won't transform your thinking. And without a change in thinking, your results will always stay the same. Some people say, "I don't have time to read." But the truth is, they have time for everything else. Hours spent on entertainment, distractions, meaningless conversations, but no time for learning. That's not a time issue. That's a priority issue. If your future matters to you, if your success matters to you, then learning must become a part of your daily life. I once met a young man who told me he wanted to be wealthy. I asked him what books he was reading. He said, "I don't like reading." So I told him, "Then you're telling me you don't like success, because success requires learning." He looked at me, surprised. He had never connected the two. But how could he expect to build wealth without first building his mind? Wealthy people read. They seek wisdom. They learn from those who have done it before. If you want to get rich, start by filling your mind with the knowledge that leads to wealth. Read about money. Read about business. Read about mindset. Every book you pick up has the potential to change the way you think. And when your thinking changes, your actions change. And when your actions change, so do your results. Some people say, "I already know enough." But let me ask you this. If what you know today was enough to make you rich, wouldn't you already be rich? If what you know today was enough to change your life, wouldn't your life already be different? The truth is, if you're not where you want to be, it's because there's something you haven't learned yet. You don't have to read every book in the world, but you do have to read the right books. Books that challenge you, books that open your mind, books that teach you how to think differently, act differently, and achieve differently. So pick up a book, invest in your mind, because the books you don't read won't help you. But the ones you do can change everything. If you want to change your financial future, start by changing yourself. The best investment you'll ever make is not in stocks, not in real estate, not in business. It's in you. Because when you grow, everything around you grows. When you improve, your results improve. Some people look for the next big opportunity. They want the secret to getting rich. But the real secret is this: wealth follows personal growth. If you develop the right skills, the right mindset, and the right habits, success becomes automatic. But if you stay the same, no amount of opportunity will change your life. I once met a man who told me he had big dreams. He wanted to start his own business, build wealth, and live a better life. But when I asked him what he was doing to prepare himself, he had no answer. He was waiting for the right time, the right opportunity. But the truth is, the right time never comes. if you're not ready. You have to be ready for success before it arrives. That means investing in your knowledge, developing your skills, and improving your mindset. The rich understand this. They don't wait for luck. They prepare for success. They take courses, read books, attend seminars, and surround themselves with people who challenge them to grow. They invest in their personal development because they know the returns are unlimited. Think about it. If you improve your ability to communicate, you can close more deals, build stronger relationships, and create more opportunities. If you develop your financial knowledge, you can make better decisions with your money and create lasting wealth. If you sharpen your leadership skills, you can inspire others and build a thriving business. Every skill you develop increases your value in the marketplace, and the more valuable you become, the more success you attract. Some people say investing in yourself is expensive. But let me ask you, what's more expensive? Investing in your growth or staying the same? What costs more? Spending money on learning or losing opportunities because you weren't prepared? The price of ignorance is always higher than the price of education. No one is born with success. It's built step by step through learning, improving, and taking action. If you're willing to invest in yourself, there are no limits to what you can achieve. So don't wait for life to change. Start changing yourself today. Because the better you become, the better your life will be. Some people think that knowledge alone will change their lives. They believe that reading books, attending seminars, and listening to successful people will somehow bring success. But that's not how it works. Knowledge is only potential power. It becomes real power when you apply it. There are people who have read every book on wealth, but they're still broke. They know all about health, but they're still out of shape. They understand discipline, but they still procrastinate. Why? Because they never put what they learn into action. They collect information, but never use it. I once met a man who told me he had studied business for years. He had read hundreds of books on entrepreneurship. He could explain marketing, sales, and leadership with great detail. But he was still struggling financially. I asked him, "What business are you in?" He said, "Oh, I haven't started one yet. I'm still learning." That was the problem. He had knowledge, but he wasn't using it. He was waiting for the perfect moment, but the perfect moment never comes. If you wait until you feel 100% ready, you'll never start. Action creates momentum, and momentum leads to results. You don't have to know everything before you begin. Just take the first step. If you've read about investing, start investing. If you've studied leadership, start leading. If you've learned about discipline, start practicing it. The best way to learn is by doing. Some people are afraid to take action because they fear failure. But failure is part of the process. Every successful person has failed, but they didn't stop. They learned from their mistakes, made adjustments, and kept going. If you take action and fail, you're still ahead of the person who never tried. It's not enough to know what to do. You have to do what you know. Imagine someone who buys a book on fitness, studies it, memorizes every detail, but never exercises. Will they get in shape? Of course not. The same applies to success. Reading about it won't make you successful. You have to act. Knowledge without action is wasted potential. But knowledge applied can change your life. So don't just learn, use what you learn. Because results don't come from what you know. They come from what you do. Everything we've talked about comes down to one thing: taking action. You can have the best ideas, the best plans, and the best intentions, but without action, nothing changes. Success is not about what you know, it's about what you do with what you know. There are people out there with half your knowledge, half your talent, but they're getting ahead because they take action. They don't wait for the perfect time. They don't wait until they feel ready. They just start. And because they start, they grow, they learn, they adjust, and eventually they succeed. So ask yourself, what have you been putting off? What knowledge have you gained that you haven't applied yet? What step have you been afraid to take? Decide today that you won't wait any longer. Take one step, make one decision, apply one thing you've learned, and then keep going. Because the future belongs to those who do, not those who wish, not those who plan, but those who act. So go out there, take control of your life, and put what you've learned into action. Your success is waiting for you, but only if you go after it.